Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Joe Rogan and Spotify speaking out, sounding incredibly reasonable in the wake of the cancel culture tidal wave. It's been threatening to wash over them. But not surprisingly, that isn't enough for some high-profile folks who want him gone. That is coming up. But first, there's been a lot of news about police and policing this past week. Police officers intentionally killed in near record numbers in 2021. And this month, news of officers killed in Houston and New York, among other places. So this weekend, CNN created an hour special on policing in America. But of course, it wasn't about the cops who've been killed in near record numbers and the dangers of being a police officer. No, it was, of course, about police misconduct and bias.
Traffic stops where drivers pay the ultimate price.
Shots fired. Subject is down.
In a system fraught with bias. A CNN special report. Traffic stop. Dangerous encounters.
To be clear, CNN is a news network, and yet this series is mostly a sort of greatest hits of police misconduct, even though the news of the week has been about cops getting killed. Here's how show host Sarah Seidner tried to sell the idea that cops should not be so concerned or worried when making a traffic stop.
An officer is seriously injured in 1 out of about every 360,000 stops. Put another way, 98% of traffic stops resulted in no injuries to an officer or minor injuries.
Wait, so officers are injured in 2% of all traffic stops? That is way higher than I would have thought. That's a huge number. That means using her 36,000 number that in 720 of those, the cops are injured? The documentary then tried to just completely write off a staggering number of successful traffic stops.
I found they only find contraband about 1/4 of the time. That means 3/4 of the people are searched fruitlessly.
Wait, again, so finding guns or drugs on 1/4 of those cases is going to result in a lot of guns and drugs being taken off the street. How does that show a failure by the cops?
Another study, this one from 2017, suggests pretextual stops do not help prevent crime. Researchers looked at equipment and registration violation stops in Nashville over a 7-year period. They found no relationship between the number of those stops in Nashville and the rate of crime there.
Pretextual stop means a police officer stops a vehicle in order to conduct a speculative criminal investigation. But what kind of study is that? The rate of crime broadly wasn't reduced based on the number of traffic violations? What does that prove? That's like saying in areas where less pizzas are sold, there must be a correlation to better health. Those of you who watch the show each night know that we spotlight the dangers that officers in the field face. Now, let me be anecdotal the way CNN was through much of the documentary. On multiple occasions, we see police officers in the line of fire during what started as a traffic stop. And in many cases, that is how police find missing fugitives. Let me be clear. I believe there still is racial bias in our society, and that can bleed over into policing. And bad officers who do bad things must be held accountable. But this CNN special is basically advocating that cops with weapons no longer be involved in pulling over vehicles because it must be the cop's fault in cases where the situation gets escalated. Joining me now to talk actual numbers and not speculation is Jillian Snider, retired NYPD officer who is now a lecturer at the top-ranked John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. Thanks so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. What did you make of this CNN documentary?
Well, hi, thank you so much for having me. I was pretty disturbed, honestly, by the documentary because it really fails to call into context how dangerous car stops are for police officers. I was a cop in the South Bronx for most of my career, and I can tell you car stops are one of the most dangerous encounters that a cop could face.
And you know that their position is, well, that's another reason not to be having police officers doing traffic stops, right? The suggestion seems to be that the people who do the traffic stops shouldn't even have a weapon at all with them. What do you make of that?
Well, car stops are by nature, it's up to the suspect or the person that you're pulling over. They kind of dictate what the cop does. So when you go through your initial training as a police officer, you learn there's two types of car stops. There's just your routine car stop. Then there's your felony car stop. Felony car stops are very different. Usually there's a serious reason you're pulling the car over, whether it be it's stolen, whether it be it fled the scene of a felony, whether it fits the description of someone, and you go out to that car very differently than you would a routine traffic stop. But I could tell you, in all of my time as a cop, routine traffic stops, we usually yielded significant felonious arrests out of them.
Now, the Washington Post has been keeping track of every deadly officer-involved shooting since 2015. And it's often cited, right? And people like to talk numbers and statistics. And of the nearly 7,000 incidents, 4,000 involved a suspect with a gun. And in nearly 1,200 more, there was a suspect with a knife. I think that there is a sense out there, if we can put up that full screen, I think that there is a sense out there, falsely, that the majority of officer-involved incidents involve suspects with no weapon.
This website, I mean, I am a professor, and a lot of my students will cite that website. And just looking at this year, 2022, that's reporting 13 people killed by police. 12 of those individuals had either a gun or a dangerous weapon on them when they were shot. But that's not what the disclaimer is when you open up that website. It's just cops kill people. And it doesn't go into the specifics of most of the time, the large majority of the time, the use of force was justified.
Right. And I think that a lot of people are going to be surprised, and based on the media coverage of this stuff, that of the 6,953 people shot and killed by police, 137 of them were unarmed black men and women. So that's about 2% of the people who were shot were unarmed black men and women. Now, that's not a justification, and I'm not suggesting, and therefore those shootings were okay. They should all be investigated, as they always are. But when it comes to the media narrative, the notion that there's this huge number of black men and women who are being shot and killed by police, it's just not even borne out by the numbers the Washington Post is keeping. No,
and just to make a point, the use of force incidents in the United States are collected, and there's like a 1.8% of use of force incidents, or even the threat of use of force incidents. So in reality, there's hundreds of thousands of police citizen encounters every single year by the 800,000 sworn police officers or deputies, and under 2% include force or even the threat of the use of force.
And I should say, to be fair, that people would point out that, wait, Dan, you're only highlighting one of the statistics. The other statistic, they would say, shows that proportionately more of the people who are being killed are people of color than white people, even though more white people are shot in terms of the percentage of the population, that more of the people who are being shot and killed proportionately are people of color. And that is certainly an issue that needs to be investigated, et cetera. But I'm concerned about the way that this was done in this CNN documentary. I mean, they report, for example, about Nashville and that stops don't prevent crimes. You saw that in the documentary. What did you make of it?
I mean, again, I think it's just putting out a false narrative. If you look this year alone, we've had officers dragged in Philadelphia. The suspect in the car had a firearm. We've had officers shot during car stops, I believe in Wisconsin, in Georgia, in California. We had an officer shot and killed in Texas, all on car stops. So obviously the suspects driving those cars had firearms if all of those officers were shot.
Yep. And let me be very clear again. You will see me holding accountable bad police officers. When they engage in conduct that is reprehensible or criminal, you will see me and hear me holding them accountable. But you will also see me and hear me, unlike many others in the mainstream media, talking about police heroism, talking about police officers who've been shot and killed in the line of duty, and not trying to just shape statistics to fit a particular narrative, but to talk about these issues more broadly, as these issues have to be discuss. Final question, Jillian. I mean, is it frustrating for you watching the media coverage sometimes as someone who studies these numbers?
It is. It's really challenging, especially because of where I teach. I teach at the famous College for Criminal Justice. I have a lot of students who want to be law enforcement officers. And then surprisingly, I have a lot of students who see the challenges and the issues with the system, which we all recognize. Cops understand that things have to change as well, but we cannot undervalue the dangerousness of policing. We have to give credit to police officers for going out there every single day and doing their job. And as you said, hold officers accountable when they make a mistake.
Yep, or beyond that, right? Even if it's not just a mistake, if it's intentional conduct, definitely hold them responsible. That's not the point. The point is that this is not the week for CNN to be doing that documentary based on absolutely no news when the news of the week is all these cops getting killed. Jillian Snider, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Coming up, I've made it very clear. I think President Biden's pledge to nominate an African-American woman to the Supreme Court was a mistake. Not the act of doing it, but the promise to only look at black women for the job. And now a new poll shows that most Americans, including most Democrats, feel that way too. Many are still furious at me for saying this. That's next. I've made it clear on this show that I believe President Biden's political pledge to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court seat vacated by retired Justice Stephen Breyer undermines not just faith in the credentials of the eventual nominee, who likely will be highly qualified by any objective standard, but also in the court itself. Picking a black woman is terrific. Announcing that you will only choose among black women is something else. And it hasn't just been on the Supreme Court. The Biden administration has been regularly putting out releases about other judicial nominations that first and foremost focus on race, sexuality, gender, country of origin to show how unique and groundbreaking the nominees will be. For example, a woman who would be the first openly LGBT federal judge in Colorado and the first openly LGBT woman to serve as a federal district judge in any state west of the Mississippi. And now this, a nominee who would be the only active AAPI male judge on the U.S. District for the Southern District of New York. The Biden administration is creating the perception that those are the main reasons that these very accomplished candidates are being selected. And if you live outside the media bubble, the vast majority of Americans aren't happy about it either. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows 76% of Americans believe, despite his pledge, President Biden should consider all possible nominees, as opposed to 23% who think he should consider just the nominees who are black women. And get this, more than half of Democrats, 54%, want Biden to consider all nominees. Of course, an overwhelming majority of Republicans want him to do the same. Now, announcing those things as predetermined criteria, I believe, is demeaning to the women who have worked their whole lives to possibly be nominated to this prestigious position. Federal Judge J. Michelle Childs, the only name the Biden administration has confirmed as being under consideration, received a ringing endorsement from South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham over the weekend. There's also Ketanji Brown Jackson, federal appellate judge who once clerked for Justice Breyer, and California Supreme Court Justice Leandra Kruger, who also clerked on the Supreme Court. All would be highly qualified by any objective standard, as was Amy Coney Barrett. And look, yes, I know Ronald Reagan pledged on the campaign trail to nominate the first woman to the Supreme Court. And Donald Trump said he'd fill Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat in the days following her death with a woman. Yes, I think that was a mistake too, but the more you narrow it, the more it undermines the faith in the process. President Biden made a political choice to make this pledge. And now it's coming back to haunt him, not just politically, but also from those of us who just care about the sanctity of the court. Joining me now, Democratic strategist Michael Starr Hopkins. Michael, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. What am I getting wrong here?
Look, I mean, the court should look like what America looks like. Representation matters. And so the idea that President Biden would say that he wants to appoint a black female justice, I think goes just to this point. Look, the framers specifically put the power to name a justice in the political branch of the government, and that's not a mistake.
But again, I'm not challenging him choosing a black woman, right? I get it. I think that, we've seen it again and again by many presidents where certain factors have come into play, right? And some people say to me, well, what about people who say that they're just going to pick someone from the Federalist Society or someone who's pro-life, et cetera? That's not the same to me as saying I'm going to pick someone of a particular gender and race, and then it feels like it undermines that person when that person gets selected.
But to who? I mean, look, we've had the Supreme Court for hundreds of years and yet to have an African-American woman on the court, yet to have a viewpoint of an African-American woman, one that is at the foundation of this country. And so the fact that society would want him to hide the fact that he believes that it's important that we have African-American women on the court, I think goes to some of the very issues at the foundation of kind of the racial problems we're dealing with.
Let me ask you to put on your political hat for a moment. The fact is that President Biden pledged this because he wanted to make sure he could get black women out there voting. There's no doubt that this was a political choice he made, and I get that. But now you see the majority of Democrats coming out and saying, we wish he wouldn't just look at black women. So politically, if you were advising him, would you say to him now, you know what? Just say you're going to look at everybody, and then if you want to pick a black woman, terrific.
No, I told him to double down. Look, African Americans, and specifically African American women, are at the foundation of the Democratic Party. And for far too long, they've been ignored. And so I think acknowledging the fact that there are African American attorneys, specifically African American women, like my mother, who was a single parent who worked her way through law school while putting her child through school, I think acknowledging those struggles that African-American women deal with disproportionately compared to white Americans. I mean, the court has been 95% white. No one seemed to have a problem when people took...
But that's a great point. I'm much more interested in hearing about the story behind how someone got there, right, than I am... there could be a woman is selected who came from a very privileged background, right, who happens to be a black woman. I would think the point... Yeah, go ahead.
When she gets pulled over, no one knows that she's a privileged black woman. She's a black woman. And I think
but when you're nominated for the Supreme Court, we're not talking about being pulled over, right? We're talking about being a justice on the Supreme Court, which you just made a compelling argument as to why background should matter, why it should matter how someone got to where they are. And I'm saying that I'm fearing that that's being sidelined in exchange for simply looking at gender and race, and you get the final word.
Yeah, I would just say that no African-American woman just happens to end up on the Supreme Court. She has to not only be qualified, but work twice as hard as every black man or white man in her class and in her career. And I think it would be interesting to see the people who now complain about black women being singled out by Biden, whether or not they had those same problems when Clarence Thomas replaced Thurgood Marshall, because that for sure was an affirmative action hire.
Michael Starr Hopkins, thank you for coming on the program. Important conversation. Appreciate it. Coming up, Tom Brady and Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, both with big and credible retirement news. But when the rumor mill started churning, Breyer was forced to admit, yes, I'm leaving. But Brady was able to spin that I haven't really decided yet. Neither man wanted to make the announcement, but only one of them had the power to stop it. The tale of two exits, and yes, I will be making a reference to Jerry Maguire's Show Me the Money. Coming up next. Time now for our Mediaite Moments. We check in on the day's bias, buzz, and bull in the world of cable news and beyond. Two big stories broke at the end of last week. Two major public figures set to retire, Tom Brady and Justice Stephen Breyer. The way that the news unfolded so differently, however, says a ton about our media and who has real juice to get the story out on their terms. First up was from the Supreme Court.
NBC News has learned that Stephen G. Breyer will step down as a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court at the end of his current term.
Then on Saturday, retirement news moved from the highest court in the land to the greatest quarterback in NFL history.
Breaking news from our Adam Schefter and Jeff Darlington. Tom Brady is going to retire after 22 seasons. You name the record, he pretty much holds it. 7-time Super Bowl champion, all-time leader in passing yards, completions, attempts, touchdowns. Tom Brady retiring after 22 years.
Two massive stories from well-respected reporters and anonymous sources. each of which initially made a big splash. Eventually, competing news outlets confirmed the Breyer news and ran with it.
And we have breaking news right now. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer is set to retire at the end of this term.
The liberal anchor of the U.S. Supreme Court is retiring.
This has actually just been confirmed by our Wolf Blitzer that at 83 years old, after 27 years on the Supreme Court, Justice Stephen Breyer, the leading liberal on the court, he will retire.
Everyone was in on the story except for one notable exception, Justice Breyer himself.
I now have multiple sources telling me that Justice Breyer was not planning to announce his retirement today. No, only he knows that. And as we wait on the court, the longer we wait, it seems like that is a possibility. I'm told that he is, quote, upset that the way that this is being handled was not the timeline that he had planned.
So Breyer wanted to break this news on his terms and wasn't ready to make the announcement. But journalists were able to confirm it and just ignore his desire to wait. Not so for the Brady retirement. Just after the story broke, which even his own company, TB12, confirmed, his agent sort of poured cold water on the story with the following wishy-washy statement. Without getting into the accuracy or inaccuracy of what's being reported, Tom will be the only person to express his plans with complete accuracy. He knows the realities of the football business and planning calendar as well as anybody, so that should be soon. So that's not a no, he's not retiring. It's more of a he wants to announce it himself request. But then the sports media assisted with that spin.
But sources tell NBC News Brady told his team he has not made a final decision.
Brady's father, Tom Brady Sr., also telling multiple reporters his son hasn't made up his mind.
This is not how Tom Brady wanted this to come out. ESPN jumped the gun a little bit.
So a decision is coming soon. I just don't think Brady was ready to let it happen today, and so he's trying to maybe control his own narrative.
Right, and then Tom's own company pulled the confirmation. It seems almost certain that the report of his retirement is accurate, and the rest is just cover. But see the difference in these two stories? On one of the 9 most powerful judges in the nation wants to hold back the announcement, the media ignores that desire. He doesn't have an agent and others to flack for him. But an NFL great, the media backs off and reports his desired narrative. I wonder why he was so insistent.
Tom Brady will earn another $15 million if he waits until Friday to retire. This, as the superstar quarterback is reportedly done after 22 seasons.
Jerry Maguire learned the hard way that show me the money is much more powerful than let me make my announcement in due time so the processes can be more orderly. That's our wrap-up of the day's media bias, buzz, and bull. Coming up, podcaster Joe Rogan has overcome the calls for him to be canceled with all signs indicating Spotify won't cave. I think that's a good thing. My next guest may disagree with me as we try to present both sides of the story. Straight ahead. Joe Rogan and Spotify speaking out as the backlash intensified toward the podcast megastar and his exclusive distributor. Critics have accused Rogan and Spotify of spreading misinformation on COVID-19, and now a handful of artists of yesteryear, such as Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Bruce Springsteen guitarist Niles Lofgren, pulling their music from the streaming service. But what are these critics really asking for? They want people to go to other services like Amazon or other audio services? Take a look at this tweet from Neil Young's account. All folks looking for my music can easily head to Amazon Music. Except none of these companies are immune from the COVID criticism. In the top 10 on the Amazon nonfiction bestseller list is The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who just last week suggested unvaccinated people have less freedom than Anne Frank. Now, those sorts of books are regularly bestsellers on Young's preferred platform. Others have suggested to migrate to my other home at Sirius Radio, which I think is great since I'm on the POTUS channel there, and I hope you join me at 2 p.m. every day Eastern Time. But if you listen to the Patriot channel, many there are far more radical than Rogan on COVID vaccine and mask skepticism. This effort at deplatforming isn't just hypocritical, it's ineffective. Rogan and Spotify, under fire since December, Joe Rogan Experience released an episode with Dr. Robert Malone, a physician with a history of highly controversial statements related to COVID. The episode, Malone spread a discredited conspiracy theory about a mass psychosis occurring throughout the world, causing people to adopt cautious behaviors to protect themselves from COVID, in addition to other stuff. But I give Rogan some credit. In a new Instagram video, Rogan promised a more nuanced, careful approach to certain subjects in the future and more direct, immediate rebuttals to some of the most provocative opinions heard on his show.
Again, I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than just talk to people and have interesting conversations. I didn't plan it. I can't believe it's as successful as it is. So my pledge to you is that I will do my best to try to balance out these more controversial viewpoints with other people's perspectives so we can maybe find a better point of view.
His show has become one of the biggest platforms in all of media. His responsibilities are now greater than they were when he was hosting D-list comics from his garage. But he's also not a news guy who should be held to news guy standards. Good for him for recognizing his influence and offering to course correct. But trying to end Rogan is the classic example of cancel culture, except he's too big to cancel at this point. Spotify, for its part, announced that it will be adding content advisory labels to podcasts which discuss COVID-19. The label will include a link providing direct access to the latest information from public health. In a statement, they said, quote, based on the feedback over the last several weeks, it's become clear to me that we have an obligation to do more to provide balance and access to widely accepted information from the medical and scientific communities, guiding us through this unprecedented time. That was from Spotify CEO Daniel Ek in a statement, said, these issues are incredibly complex. We've heard you, especially those from the medical and scientific communities. But there was also this from the Spotify CEO, signaling that it will not cave. We know we have a critical role to play in supporting creator expression while balancing it with the safety of our users. In that role, it's important to me that we don't take on the position of being content censor while also making sure that there are rules in place and consequences for those who violate them. Sounds like the right balance. So now our parents' favorite musicians are just, well, going to be a little harder to find. Rockin' in this free world isn't what it once was. Joining us now is Bridgette Todd. She's the communications director for Ultraviolet, a progressive group which does advocacy work on various issues impacting women. The group has come out strongly against Joe Rogan, calling on Spotify to dump him. Bridgette, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. What do you think I'm getting wrong here?
I actually think you did a really nice job of summarizing some of it. Honestly, I don't really see this as a censorship issue or even really a content moderation issue. Spotify invited Rogan to be an exclusive relationship with them where they're paying him $100 million to make this content for Spotify and Spotify only. And whether Spotify likes it or not, that makes Spotify Joe Rogan's publisher, not a neutral platform who really can't have any say over.
I agree.
And so I guess
I agree with that.
It shouldn't be controversial to expect a media publisher to exercise a little fact checking and editorial standards on their media properties.
But again, you're applying, and again, I'm not going to disagree that fact checking is a bad thing, but it sort of sounds like a news thing, right? Fact checking is things that people in the news do, right? He's an entertainment show, and he's doing a show. And look, I'm not going to defend some of the stuff he said. I've been critical of it in the past. But the idea of sort of getting rid of him by Spotify, are you still, even in the wake of what they said and what Rogan has promised for the future, do you still want him off Spotify?
Well, I think what I want from Spotify is to develop a really clear policy around how they will handle misinformation, make sure that policy is clear and transparent, and then most importantly, really make sure that when somebody repeatedly, goes against that policy, there are consequences. And so it's really not about Rogan or Spotify. It's really a systemic issue. I'm so glad that you brought up the issues with other platforms like Amazon. Folks are really galvanizing around Rogan and Spotify, but really it is about building a digital media ecosystem where the most extreme voices are not the ones always being rewarded and amplifying. And I think that that's what we have right now, where voices that lie, voices that traffic and misinformation are the ones being rewarded with cushy contracts and also being amplified. And so that's really what I'm about, making sure that it's not just about a conversation about Joe Rogan, but really it's about putting policies in place that are clear and enforceable so that going forward, we aren't having people traffic and misinformation.
And what do you make of Amazon selling books that have misinformation in them? I mean, the bottom line is if Amazon decides not to promote those books, these books are finished.
Amazon, you are absolutely right to call Amazon out for this. I think that, it makes me so sad that we're having this conversation where all the major players are kind of have their hands dirty in terms of promoting misinformation and bad actors. Honestly, it really points to some of the systemic issues in our digital media ecosystem. But truly, we deserve and we need an ecosystem where the people that are being most promoted are not people peddling lies and extremism and misinformation.
Yeah.
And I think that we're talking about Joe Rogan right now, but it is not just about Joe Rogan. This problem is so much bigger than him. And it's really about the kind of ecosystem we want to have.
Bridgette, but am I right in saying that we agree that Rogan shouldn't be canceled on Spotify now?
I am not going to use the word canceled. I think that's a reductive way to put it.
I intentionally used it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'll just say this.
Do we agree?
I'm no big fan of Joe Rogan, but this is not about me wanting to suppress or ban content that I don't personally like or personally find objectionable, right? It's about making sure that harmful misinformation, inaccurate information.
I get it, but but I'm challenging you. But I'm challenging you on where that line is, right? I'm challenging you to say, okay, is it to the point where we're okay now in saying Spotify can move forward, that Rogan said the right thing, Spotify said the right thing, and it sounds like you're saying, all right, let's give them a shot to continue. You and I may disagree down the road about what should happen, but it sounds like we agreed today that they should continue.
I think that Spotify should get a clear misinformation policy, and if Joe Rogan puts out episodes that do not break that policy, then that's great.
All right, fair enough. Bridgette Todd, thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Coming up, make sure you got your peanuts and Cracker Jacks. The latest from the Michael Avenatti trial is coming up, representing himself and asking his ex-client Stormy Daniels probing questions like, did you say you wanted me to get raped in prison? Do you talk to dead people? We will talk to one very alive person who is in court as the prosecution rests, and I'll share my favorite line from the cross-examination up next. In the insane case against Michael Avenatti, the prosecution rested today. This comes after he had a chance to cross-examine his former client, Stormy Daniels, in what was one of the more absurd and entertaining legal events of the year. Remember, a federal judge ruled that Avenatti could represent himself. He's accused of pocketing $300,000 from an advance Stormy got for her memoir by forging her signature. Avenatti cross-examined her for over 4 hours. The questioning was bizarre. This, my personal favorite, Avenatti asked, didn't you tell the New York Times that watching me work was like watching the Sistine Chapel painted? Daniels, that's what you told me to say. Avenatti's main defense was going after her character. He asked her, how do you speak with the dead? She responded, I don't know. It just sometimes happens. He'd later ask, now you mentioned that you read tarot cards for entertainment. Do you remember that yesterday? Yes. He followed up. In fact, you charge people for reading tarot cards, right? Yes, technically oracle cards, but yes. Should add for context, Daniels is part of a web TV series project called Spooky Babes. It focuses on paranormal activity. He also asked Daniels if she said on a podcast she hoped he would get sexually assaulted in prison. Quote, when I go to prison, there will be a long line of people to blank rape me. Did you not? I don't know, she said. He followed up with, do you deny that you made those statements? I don't deny it. I don't remember. This led to a whole line of outlandish questioning about the meaning of don't drop the soap. But the most important substantive issue was their contract to work together. A copy of the attorney-client fee contract was entered into evidence, showed they agreed upon a one-time payment of $100 and that Avenatti's standard hourly fees and out-of-pocket costs would come from any legal defense fund established to recuperate that money. Avenatti, now you've described this contract as a terrible deal for me, right? Daniels, I said that. Avenatti, and you've also claimed that I was supposed to get a percentage of any cases that I won for you, right? Daniels, correct. Avenatti, can you please show me where in Government Exhibit 3B that it says that? Avenatti, it doesn't. He'd go on. Attorneys don't generally work for free, he said. Correct? Daniels, that's why I was shocked when you would. Avenatti, so you understood that I was working for free, yes or no? Daniels, for $100. Avenatti, now you generally understood that attorneys take fees for their work, right? Daniels, often. It's Avenatti's third federal criminal prosecution in about as many years in a case where he was accused of extorting Nike. He was convicted and sentenced to 2.5 years. He had lawyers in that case. But then in another case where he was accused of stealing from clients, he represented himself, and that ended in a mistrial. I just love this trial. So we are thrilled to have Katie Brickley, a senior reporter for the Daily Beast, who's covered this trial extensively. Katie, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Your favorite moment so far?
Wow, I mean, there's so many. Aside from him asking if she sees dead people, I was interested in the haunted doll named Susan. Avenatti asked her whether there was a doll that talked and called her mommy. Stormy Daniels said yes. Avenatti asked if this doll played the piano and if Stormy had ever seen that. And Stormy replied, no, she didn't see that, but someone else did, and she believes that person.
It seems his whole defense is about going after her character. Has he presented any defense to explain why he did what he did with the memoir and the proceeds from the memoir and speaking directly to the agents and getting the money?
His whole argument is that he was entitled to this money. And as you said, I mean, he said Stormy shouldn't have expected him to work for free, that he worked for her for an entire year throughout 2018, not only trying to help her get her book deal, but issues with her ex-husband, the litigation with Trump and his fixer, Michael Cohen, that, you know, essentially Michael Avenatti did everything for Stormy. He made her a star, and he wasn't going to do that for free. He points to his fee agreement, which says, you know, he is entitled to a reasonable percentage of any book or media project as long as they agree about it. And so I think Michael Avenatti is trying to show that perhaps Stormy Daniels is not truthful about what sort of behind the scenes discussions that they had about his compensation. However, so far, the jury has been shown nothing on paper that indicates that there was any percentage agreed upon, that Michael Avenatti would get, you know, anything from Stormy's book deal. And Stormy herself has testified, he told me he wouldn't take a dime from my book deal and my book contract, that was mine. That's something I worked on.
Kate Brickley, I'm going to admit that I'm jealous that you get to be inside the courtroom and listening to this. I wish I could be too. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Straight ahead, everything changes in an instant for a state trooper trying to help a man when the guy pulls a box cutter on the trooper. The heart-pounding moments when a good deed takes a terrifying turn. Up next. We are on scene with police in Nashville showing the dangers that officers face every day. It starts with a man who was on the shoulder of a busy expressway last week. A Tennessee Highway Patrol trooper tried to give Landon Estep a ride home. Estep pulls a box cutter out on the trooper. Metro Nashville police were called as they were arriving. An on-duty officer from a neighboring city tries to de-escalate the situation.
Landon, don't let me go home with this today, brother, please. I gave you my word. My word means something, okay? I keep it. You will not go to jail today.
The off-duty officer was heard on other officers' body cameras. The whole time, Estep held the box cutter in his left hand and kept his right hand in his pocket.
We don't want to hurt you. We don't want to shoot you. And you don't want to hurt us. Right? I got kids to go to. I got a family to go home to. And I was on my way doing that. But my God put me here so I can help you out today. And you know it. This folks right here, they got kids in the cars. Look at that, kids over there just sitting by. Don't give them that show, brother. Okay, please. They're gonna have to live with this too, not just me and you.
Talks went on for 30 minutes. The officer kept telling Estep he would get help and would not go to jail.
Landon, please, brother, don't do it. Don't do it. No, Landon.
Now, the suspect suddenly pulled something from his pocket. What police now know, or what they're now calling a metal cylindrical object, and stepped towards the police, as you see there, took a position as if he was about to shoot a gun. 9 officers fired, hitting Estep, who died at the scene. No one else was injured. The incident is being reviewed by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Joining me once again, Sean Sticks Larkin, retired Tulsa police lieutenant. Sticks, good to have you back. All right, so the suspect had pulled a box cutter on a state trooper, but just having that box cutter alone is not going to lead them to shoot?
Well, it can get to that point, but that's not why the officer shot, out there. And as you mentioned, this trooper is just driving by and he sees a man out on the side of the road, sitting on the guardrail there. And people have questioned, he's not doing anything wrong. Why did the trooper stop? And it actually is illegal in most places to walk along the side of the highway. Is he a person whose vehicle is broke down? That's that trooper's job to stop and check on him. And the reason you see the mass response by Nashville PD, there were multiple 911 calls that came in that the trooper was struggling with the guy out there and the trooper had his gun out. So they actually toned out what they call a code 5000, which is basically, hey, an officer's in need of help. We need guys to get there.
And to be clear, when I was saying that, they wouldn't shoot him, I meant at this distance, on these facts, with him just standing there with a box cutter, they're not going to shoot him. If it was a different situation where obviously he's, close to somebody or et cetera, could be obviously very, very different. But does this seem like someone who just, didn't want help? And I was impressed by the officer who was trying to de-escalate. It sounded to me like he was saying the right things.
Yeah, again, you mentioned it when you first started talking about this. This was an off-duty officer that actually stopped, and he's the one we hear on the other officer's body cam that's trying to develop that rapport with the guy. And listen, he's saying all the right things. They're in Nashville PD. They are starting a new pilot program. I believe it's called Partners in Care, where they're trying to partner with mental health professionals in the area to respond to these types of calls. For this particular precinct, they didn't have anybody assigned there yet. But from all of my training, the mental health training we regularly do annually and things like that, this off-duty officer was saying all the right type of things. He's letting him know, hey, we're here to help you. We don't want to hurt you. Please put this down and so forth.
Yeah, it's sort of heartbreaking to see this to some degree because it did feel like the officers were making progress, particularly when you talk about an officer who wanted to give a guy a ride home. And that's how this gets escalated. All right, Sean
Yes,
Larkin,
sir.
thank you.
Tough deal.
As always, appreciate it. That does it for us tonight. News Nation Prime with Marnie Hughes starts right now. See you back here tomorrow for another edition of the show. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.